I don't know who's the platinum improvement plan.
Did you go somewhere fun?
There's still some there.
Yeah.
So really, you can't like.
So what do
tonight. Appreciate it. First thing up, I wanted to excuse Commissioner Boatwright. He had a conflict this evening, isn't able to make it. So let's go ahead and start off with the Pledge of Allegiance with Commissioner Walton.
Please repeat after me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
All right, item number 2, we'll open up for public comment. So if there's anyone here that would like to make a comment. All right, we will close public comment. Thank you. And then 3, approval of consent agenda. I'd like to open up to my fellow commissioners if you have any comments or concerns with the written agenda. Well,
I didn't see any.
I didn't either. Let me just really quick.
welcome back to.
No, we're good. We're good. Everything was fine.
I reviewed it and I don't have any issues.
Okay, I am good as well. Can I get a motion for approval?
I'll make a motion that we approve of consent agenda for the planning commission dated 4/14/2022. And then
I'll second.
All right, quick roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes. We're good. Okay. Next up is public hearing and action on amending ordinance 2022-08 short-term rental regulations. City code 10-10.18. So we'll open up for public hearing if there are any.
Do we need to make a motion?
Make
Make a motion.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Can I get, actually, yeah, let's open up for staff first to get some background and then we'll open up for vote.
Oh, yeah, I know.
That is a good question. Okay. So as we discussed in the last planning commission meeting, there are some amendments that we wanted to make. The short-term rental committee had proposed to make for our short-term rental ordinance, and they fell in these 5 categories. Must be a primary resident, must possess the residence for more than 12 months, to clarify the single-family homes and single-family zones, establish a distance from schools that they would be allowed, and cap the number of citywide short-term rentals at 0.5% of the residential units, not exceeding 25 total. Okay, so the first one with the must be a primary residence and must possess the residence of for more than 12 months. This is the, we would add a section called primary residence. And within that section, we'd add the following provisions to the code. This is taken from the draft ordinance directly. So single family homes that operate a short-term rental shall be the primary or principal place of residence of the property owner as defined in Utah Code annotated section 20-A-105. What that means is that those are the provisions establishing for basically voter registration as a primary residence. And so if you live in the home for more than 6 months of a year, and there's provisions based off of church service or military service or things like that that may temporarily take you away from your home, but still allows you to establish your residency at that home. We took this portion of the code pretty much directly from the I-80U ordinance, where that establishes that it must be a primary residence. And so basically we changed out that operate an internal accessory dwelling unit to a short-term rental. The next provision was applications for a short-term rental shall not be accepted until which time the owner of the subject property has demonstrated ownership of no less than 12 consecutive months. Obviously it looks like there's a typo too, so we'll have to fix that. I put consecutives instead of consecutive. So we'll I don't believe that needs to be in a motion. It's a grammatic error, we would just fix that. We'll fix that in post, as they say in the movie business. The second, clarify single-family homes and single-family zones. After reading the code, and you can make a recommendation if you feel this is not sufficient, reading the code over with our legal counsel of the definition of short-term or vacation rental has within it means a transient lodging facility in a single-family dwelling unit in public lodging facilities as part of the planned unit development, or an accessory dwelling unit occupied by a single group on a temporary basis for less than 30 consecutive days is an alternative to a hotel or motel. That's kind of the standard definition for the state, but we feel is with a single family dwelling unit that also has a definition within our code of a dwelling type single family, which places it in a single family zone, basically. So it wouldn't be allowed in a multifamily unit at that point. So we feel that does define that. Are there any questions or comments on that? This is the provision we added for distance from schools. So we'll add a section called proximity from schools. The location of short-term rentals shall not be nearer than 2,000 feet from primary or secondary schools. Such distance shall be measured as a radius originating from the center point of the property of which the school resides. And so I feel that pretty much sums that up. And then to put the cap of the number of permits that would be available, we add a section called number of permits, available permits. The number of available permits allowed shall be calculated at 0.5% of the total number of residential units within city limits, not to exceed 25. Availability of permits shall be on a first come, first served basis according to a process established by the city manager. This gives us the ability to create a waiting list if we so desire, or any other method to manage those applications as they come in. So those are the amendments to the short-term rental code.
Was there just the 4?
There was 5 total, but we combined 2
Oh, gotcha,
in the
gotcha.
primary residence. We felt that they fit together,
Okay.
and so that allowed us to
Okay.
consolidate that a little bit.
I had a quick question,
Mhm.
just while we were talking over the point, on that primary residence, do we have where it says, you know how they say that the owner has to have demonstrated ownership of no less than 12 consecutive months? What determines the start date of their ownership? Is it the date that it closes on the home, the property? Is it the date they move in? Because sometimes there can be a 30-day, 60-day, space of
Mhm.
time. I was just curious if we needed to determine, so it's consistent for everybody.
So we can write that and make that determination in code if we would like. We did leave that a little bit ambiguous because what would happen at that point is that the planning commission, when they review the conditional use permit, they can determine if they demonstrate
Okay.
the ownership.
It keeps it
at
a little
that point.
more, I guess, open.
A
for
little
us.
bit more open for you
Okay.
so that you have the ability to use your discretion at that point.
Okay.
If you want to lock it down, we can or suggest a
I
locking
just
it
think so
down.
that it's more consistent is kind of what I'm feeling, like everybody knows it's gonna be the date that you took occupancy, I guess is the word, but it's kind of up to the rest of the commission too, what they think.
Generally, we can't really tell when they physically.
Yeah.
We can tell when it's closed on that property.
Yep, because you've got your settlement date, it's recorded, it's, all of that is any title company can tell you.
Well, and I'm trying to play this forward to think, if we're gonna have a conversation with somebody saying, can you show me proof of when you moved in? And they're like, well, here's a picture of me moving boxes in with a moving van. It's like, that seems a little unconscionable. I think having something that is a little bit more concrete and applicable across the board, I think is a better way to go.
So can I just procedurally ask, like, should we have this conversation after the public hearing?
Oh,
Okay.
that's true, sorry, I
Yep, my
apologize,
bad.
I jumped
No,
into.
no, you're fine.
Yeah, that's right. Any other direct questions for Sean? No. All right, then I'll ask for a motion on this open public hearing then.
I can make a motion to open the public hearing on ordinance 2022-08.
Michael Grant, 2622 Deer Run
We
Drive.
haven't finished the motion yet.
I'll second.
Nice, second by Commissioner Wilson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Now I can go. Michael Grant, 2622 Deer Run Drive. I had not planned on talking, but I saw something technical, so maybe run it by you. 2,000 linear feet from the center of the property. If the property is small, then it makes sense. If the property is, let's say, 5 miles by 5 miles, or 1 mile by 1 mile, then the IADU can be right next to the 2 mile by 2 mile property, because that 2,000 linear miles will be consumed within the area of the property. So now you're like right next to it, technically speaking. Should really be 2,000 linear feet from the outermost reaches of that property. I don't know what's the industry standard, but this is just me talking. Thank you.
I don't see any other comments. Can we get a motion to close public comment?
We'll make a motion to close public comment for public hearing. Oh, sorry, the public hearing.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, let's open up for comments from the commission.
All right, so if I can go first, I just want to better understand why we want to have 12 months of residency established prior to them making the application. What's the objective? Maybe I missed it in the.
Yeah, the desire was just to establish residency so that an individual won't purchase a property solely for the purpose of a short-term rental. So establishing residency, typically that calls for at least 6 months of ownership, and being the primary residence. And so it was, the intent was to ensure that that individual would have a vested interest in the property and maintain it, rather than open as a short-term rental as soon as they purchase the property.
So I guess to follow that question, if we're going to establish that it is their primary residence and they're going to live there, do we care when they purchase? And that's
Well, yeah, because how do you start your month, if you bought a home July 1st, you can very easily count down the 12 months. So if an applicant was to come in on, say, July 1st of the following year, you're like, yep, you've got your 12 months, you're good to go. If we don't have that start date and they're just like, yeah, it was sometime in July.
Well, I'm just generally speaking,
Yeah.
like if we're going to have the requirement that you live in the residence as
Primary.
as a condition of you getting the application approved,
Mhm.
and we're going to cap this, then it becomes a little bit of an administrative burden, right?
Well, yeah.
That may not be necessary. So once we get to 25, then are you going to say, okay, you have to be, not only are we going to take a backlog, but you also have to prove that you've been in the home for a year beyond that? Yeah, and I'm just wondering, it seems like it might be a little bit
It's a
too.
checkbox. It's a checkbox on the application,
Right.
what was your date? Obviously, if somebody's been living there for longer than the 12-month period, I think it'll be a little bit easier,
Sure.
like, oh, yep,
I'm
3
just
years, whatever,
trying to establish why.
Yeah.
I think the intent was, Trevor said it, to make sure there's a vested personal interest in the property, not that you just have,
Beyond purchasing.
right. So that you
Living
have,
there.
so that we don't have a company come in and purchase a property and they immediately turn it into a rental.
Or an individual coming in with the intention that right away it's going to be turned into a short-term rental without the intention of ever living in the home. It's just going to be a short-term rental.
And if I could put a finer tip on that, I think in addition to that, the community has been concerned about the ownership of behavior of those who come to it. And so if it's used purely as an investment property, remotely managed, it is hard to have somebody that is vested in the community. But if somebody is living there for a year, they're creating a network of neighbors, of friends. These neighbors now have a neck to throttle, if you will. of somebody, if the people that come and rent it are, nefarious or in any way, creating disturbance in the neighborhood.
So the other reason I ask this is affordability of housing is pretty high. And sometimes in order to justify the expense of getting into the house, you might consider it as a business opportunity to have a short-term rental. And so I'm wondering, is it too restrictive to say that you have to have an established 12-year history prior to, having a
12 months.
business open up?
I think that's the point though.
I'll be
Well,
honest, yeah, I think that's
so-
the exact point of
So
having
then
that.
That's where I'm going with this.
Yeah,
Like,
and
we're already saying that you have to live there as a condition of,
were you here
that
when that
license.
public comment or the public, when we had everybody that was in here that was literally talking about these were the concerns they had and. you
No,
know,
I was
You were
here.
here, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Because I think that's what's driven a lot of, kind of the creation, although it was under review before that, correct?
Yes.
Before we had all that
Yeah,
public comment? Okay,
Yeah, the short-term rental committee actively discussed this.
before it even came,
Because
okay.
these bullet points.
So let me ask this, if we've established that it's a requirement that you occupy the premise,
For minimum.
well, no, just as a condition of your application. At what point do we say, 6 months into this, your primary residence changed? And therefore your application is no longer valid? Would that address the concern that we have? Like, it seems like we have two provisions within code that accomplish the same intent. And that is to have ownership in the community and ownership in the house as a primary residence. And it just seems like it's a little duplicative. And especially when you consider how expensive housing is.
Wait, I'm failing to see the two different policies that are duplicating each other.
So you're establishing that you want residence, the primary residence,
So for 12 months.
yeah, well, no,
No,
just
single family
residence.
home, Like you live there.
Oh,
This is your primary residence as a
Okay.
condition of the application.
Okay,
And then you're gonna have an additional qualifier to say that you're there for 12 months.
so I can parse those out right now in my head. And by the way, I want to tell you, I think that you bringing these up is very useful. I want to clarify and preface that. Number one, I think that the 12-month issue is to say, hey, you are a part of the community. I think the primary residence is to say, you're not going to flip and create this revenue generating property and go live somewhere else. Because I think,
Would be discovered as having it as your primary residence during time of application.
well, let's play it forward, right? If I was living in a house for 12 months, I make an application for and get a permit for a use, and then all of a sudden I go buy another house over in, another city and just pump this thing like crazy. If only one of those policies were in place, I could do that. If both of them were in place, then I would, after that year, after receiving the permit and then renting out my house, while this stays my primary residence, I am still on the hook in my neighborhood for,
Which
All
would be
that
the
happens.
case, like you wouldn't have multiple properties within the city that this could be applicable to. And within this city, right? So you wouldn't have an investment property or investment company coming in and buying multiple houses to make application within South Weaver City for this conditional use.
Well, that, yes, because they wouldn't be owner occupied.
Bingo.
Right.
So I'm just saying that the provisions as outlined kind of accomplish the same thing.
Well, they
Establishing
do,
ownership.
they do on that
Tied to
side,
community.
but I think there's a subtle difference that goes above and beyond that.
And that subtle difference is time, and I'm just trying to figure out
Is
why we need
continuing-
time to prove
continuing
that
to
they're
be
tied.
that primary residence.
Because think about it, a lot of people do buy second homes, vacation homes,
And
things of that
Well,
nature.
if-
And sometimes there are changes to what your primary residence has been designated as.
So if there's a change, then you would not be allowed to make application,
Because
and
it's
if
a
there's a
single family.
change,
No, even after your application. though.
well, so if there's a change in primary residence, then would that trigger a review of the conditional use permit by the planning commission?
we would have to, at the renewal of the business license, we would just make sure that they can
And they're
prove that,
annual
right?
renewals, correct?
It's whatever we want to make.
On the business license, it's an
Mhm.
annual.
Generally, the way we've done it with short-term rentals is the initial period is 12 months. They'll come back before the planning commission with their short-term rental conditional use permit, just for a review, just that one time at that 1 year mark. Every other time, it'll just be a renewal of the business license, but they do have inspections by both fire and code, and they can tell whether it's their primary residence.
So we can make that a
It's
condition
very-
of the use, right? That they come before the planning commission at certain intervals to
It already
ensure
is.
that. the-
Usually we do it once at the 12-month period, and then after
Right.
that, it's just a renewal of the business license. But again, with the code inspection, they can tell. I mean, when he does that, you can tell if somebody's living there or renting. You can also tell, a lot of times what we do, and they don't know this, but for instance, utility account. If they change to put this in like a property
Property
management,
LLC.
I'll
LLCs
notice
or
that
business
when
license.
I renew their business license, so that'll be the first trigger.
I think the initial impact for having the two provisions there, and I appreciate what you're saying, is that, I just realized I spelled something really wrong on my upcoming slide. So surprise later. The initial two, sorry, that was a squirrel moment for me. The initial two is the initial application, right? So it's not allowing somebody to apply until after 12 months. If it was a primary residence thing, we could technically say, well, you haven't established primary residency until you meet the voter registration rules, right? Which has that 6-month provision in there. It might be a little less for voter registration too, if there's other stipulations as well. But yeah, so there, it is the initial application. After that, it wouldn't necessarily matter because it would just deal off of whether it's a primary residence when they do their renewal, right? So
I'd be more comfortable with the requirement to establish yourself as a voting member in the community, right? If it's 6 months from the time that you close on the property until you're added to the voter registration rolls for the city, I'm comfortable with that. 12 months just seems like it's pulled out of.
Jeremy, I am seeing what you're trying to say. I'm Taylor.
Yeah, you
Like,
can
where's
get
this going?
Jeremy.
Thank you.
He's like, what did I?
Oh, man, I had a good buddy in grade school named Jeremy Wallner. Okay, so, what you're saying is, why the 12-month residency? If they're already proving their residency, is that enough?
Yeah. I mean, to me, what are you trying to weed out with 12 months? And I'm just not seeing it, right? I'm seeing that as a condition of the conditional use permit, you're gonna come before the city and say that you established yourself as the permanent resident of this location. And so it just seems like it
So is it the 12-month number that's the issue?
is. And I'm just trying to figure out how we arrive at 12.
It was in the short-term rental committee, it was just the discussion that they wanted to establish, have an established residency. And so they determined that they would feel comfortable with the 12 months.
Was it based off of any code, like the voter, we keep referencing this voter registration requirement? There wasn't anything in there that says it takes this long to
No.
establish?
I wouldn't
Okay.
necessarily say that it was pulled out of a hat, but it was just a number that they decided was appropriate.
And
So,
just for reference, we have 5 current short-term rentals
Mhm.
right now,
That
so
are-
we're not even anywhere
that are in
close to
compliance,
maxing out.
I
That are
should
in
say.
compliance. Yes.
Mm.
And I think for the most part, those ones have all been owner occupied and we haven't had any issues with them.
Correct.
I haven't heard any public hearings about them. So if they're
Well-
following the rules, I'm hoping it's working out. I'm
Gunshot.
hoping they're giving themselves, what they're looking for with renting out their properties, and I think that's what we're trying to do. But I also think we do have to make sure that we're taking care of the community and the neighbors. And I do agree, that the 12 months really does establish you're living there, you're meeting your neighbors, the kids, everybody that's front, back, side, around. And so when things do come up, you feel like you've got that established relationship. Can you establish it in 6 months? Possibly, yes. unless it's during winter when everybody hibernates, maybe not.
Or if
So,
you're moving homes within.
yeah,
bigger
or
cities.
6 months or things like that. So I'm okay with the 12. I don't see the issues, but
I'm just, again, just trying to figure out why we are right at a year. And again, the devil's in the details. If you, for instance, have somebody who's moving homes within South Weaver City and they want to set up this short-term rental situation, what if they're established, well-known in the community, they know their neighbors, but we're still gonna make them wait 12 months
for that property.
for that property,
Yep.
even if it's next door? You gotta wait 12 months.
I think we should.
Yeah,
Do you think you should?
I don't have any issues with the 12 months. I think 12 months is the amount of time that it takes to really establish yourself in the community. I mean, you could argue that it takes longer than that. But I think it's, in my opinion, I think that's more there to dissuade people
Yeah,
more than anything else.
Just wait
Deterrent.
from what?
yeah.
Dissuade,
well,
dissuade people from flipping their house into a rental.
going buck wild with it. Like,
So I'm still failing to see what we're dissuading them from.
if I may.
Yeah.
I think our community is trying to maintain a kid-friendly, environment. And I think the community at large is trying to be as cautious as possible, especially with this opportunity to bring in short-term rentals in the community. I know a lot of communities that don't even allow short-term rentals. And so I think that, the fact that this is kind of rolling out, I think that, there is a feeling that we want to be cautious and that we want to maintain that community policing that exists in our city. And so, I see your point from a business standpoint, saying, this seems onerous. But I think the community is saying, this is not meant to be, a main source of income. This is, I think that, people are saying, hey, look, if you're gonna come into our, very family-friendly community, you need to make sure that you're family-friendly. And so, maybe some businesses don't appreciate that, but hey, they can wait 12 months
Go somewhere.
And see,
or go somewhere else.
this
Yeah.
is where I struggle. Like 12 months does not establish you as family friendly. Just the basis of 12 months being there.
I think we have to be careful saying family friendly.
Yeah,
I think we just
sorry,
need to say
yeah,
community,
yeah.
neighborly, like,
And-
and the biggest thing is I think sometimes
Yeah.
you do get used to the people that live in your neighborhood, but when that is constantly revolving and you have a revolving door of people coming in and staying, that's where that sense of safety and security can be impacted. And I do think by having that 12-month timeframe,
Establishes
will it
permanence.
establish it? I don't know. We don't know.
So we're
But I think
saying,
we're trying to get it to that point where it's like, we've done what we can do, obviously, as a city. Because to be honest, let's go the other side of this. Okay,
Yeah.
you have to be here for 3 years before you're allowed to do that. That could be excessive,
Right.
But again, it's a huge deterrent from somebody that's coming in here looking at our single-family homes as now a business opportunity.
Or what if somebody proved their residency, let's say the 12-month wasn't there. They proved their residency
within 6 months.
6 months, 3 months, 0 months, whatever it may be. I mean, 6 months could be as arbitrary as 1 year, in my opinion. But I'm just saying, if they, are like, wow, I have 6 months, and then I can rent it out. It may take that long before they foreclose on their house, and, they could be, just trying to do something very quickly.
I'm just having a tough time, again, trying to figure out why 12 months establishes you as a good neighbor or not. And even if it doesn't establish you as a good neighbor, what recourse does it really provide?
Well, let's be honest, you can live here for 5 years and still not be a good neighbor
Bingo.
and not even be trying to do anything like
I-
this. I think it's just trying to put that qualification. I did have a quick question, and I'm not trying to
No,
take
no,
away
you're
from where you're at. The short-term rental, it's less than 30 days, is that correct?
Yes.
And then at that point, is there another time frame that has to pass before it can be re-rented again as a short term? Or can it literally be a 30-day here, a 30-day there, a 30-day there?
Most of the time it's less than that. Most of the time you find.
It's like a
out-
weekend or a week or something like that.
Yeah, but
Okay.
yeah, just not at the same time.
Okay,
I think we're at a point where we're agreeing to disagree on this one, Commissioner Walton.
Perfectly fine. It just doesn't make sense as a policy.
and with it being draft, we can
Bottom
obviously
line
say,
for
hey,
me.
this was something that this number of 12 months was something that, you know, we had some that felt strongly, we had others that were okay, and, you know, we didn't have an answer, you know, but then we leave it up to city council, because they're the ones that ultimately get to say
Yeah.
what they want.
Yeah.
And I don't think we're, you know, good conversation.
I agree. And ultimately, I just wanted to have the conversation as to how we arrived at 12 months and the why. So again, I don't feel like it accomplishes anything from a policy standpoint. So I'll leave it there. Also, the 2,000 feet, I know we talked about this when we first discussed it, but maybe Trevor, if you can help us figure out or understand better why we established 2,000 feet.
And to answer the public comment, why was it originating from the center point versus if any of the property comes within that 2,000-foot radius, it falls within the school zone and it's not going to be permitted.
We felt that 2,000 feet, a perimeter that our radius ends up being a 4,000 feet circle over the school. And so it is almost a mile.
Yeah.
So is it from the center of the school
But it's the center of
That
the
goes out?
property on the school.
or the
So,
Center of the
Property.
school property out.
center of
4,000.
the school property, then
Right.
going out in a radius
Right.
point? So that's why it's the center
Correct.
point. We're not saying the center point of the
Of
property,
the
that
residents,
the
correct.
residents.
Yeah,
Okay,
correct.
does that?
yeah. So it,
that makes more sense.
we talked about perhaps doing the perimeter, but we felt that that was maybe a little unnecessary because that would make a weird kind of, it's like those spirographs. Doing those.
Is there a way to pull it up with South Weaver Elementary
That was
and
gonna be
Highmark
another question.
Charter School?
Yeah.
Yeah, can we
Mhm.
see like visually what
Mhm.
that actually includes
Do you want to
excludes,
pull it up?
or excludes and
Pull
includes?
up a map,
It's a lot.
Kim.
It is a lot.
It is substantial. That was the recommended distance from the
And visual.
short-term rental committee. That was pulled from another state's distance that they required sexual predators to, or not sexual predators, those that are sex offenders. That's the word. And also sexual predators, but sex offenders is the official word. From being within a school. In the state of Utah, we don't have any provisions. They just can't be on school property in the state of Utah. And so that was where that 2,000 feet came from. It's not necessarily a nationwide standard by any means, but it was a standard that the short-term rental committee decided that they would want to pursue. Just open up a Google Maps of South Weaver City, and we can.
Can you do like Google Travel videos?
I think so. So that's where the 2,000 came from. That was the recommendation from the short-term rental committee. Again, as a planning commission, you can make your recommendation on if you would wish to change that. It does make a very wide swath in the community, seeing that our community is only 3.5 miles long, 4
Mhm.
miles long. So it is a large portion that is taken up by that.
And it is both schools, correct?
It is both schools. It would be the Highmark School and
Okay.
South Weaver Elementary School.
And this doesn't, I just have to ask, this doesn't apply to like daycare centers, nursery centers, preschools, anything like that,
No, just
correct?
primary and secondary.
Primary, okay, thank you.
Yeah. So I'll go over to Kim Drive. I'm not getting that proficient. Okay, so Heimer,
2000.
so 2,000 foot radius from there would be. Here. You basically,
Can you change it to a satellite view?
in a large portion of this area over here.
Mm.
And then
No, and this does not affect the current 5 applicants that have already been established. Okay. Because I have a feeling that most of the ones that have been in compliance fall within these circles.
I think at least some do.
Okay.
I know at least two.
And then a 2,000 foot radius would be this section of town would
Okay.
apply. So it would still leave quite a number of residential units that would still apply. Yeah, I don't think there's any over. Yeah, it's more than 2,000. Yeah, so it would just be those two within the city that would apply. So we'd still be allowed in this section of town, and in this section of town right here.
And only for single family.
Correct. That was how we have it written. Mhm.
Because I didn't know how to do it.
And what was the limit? It was 0.5%?
0.5% of the total households in this city. So right now we have 3,200 households within the city.
And then do we know, based upon those arcs, how many would then be taken out of that?
I don't know how many would be taken out of that, but we
Okay.
wouldn't use that in the
I
calculation.
mean, I mean, capped at 25, I can't imagine we would go below that
Mhm.
with the restrictions. Sorry, I'm just trying to visually,
They figured 25 at max build out. I think we figured 13 or 14 right now.
Yeah, we would have, our max would be about 15 right now. And then that would be 5,000 households would then be at the 25 limit. And then anything over that, we would just cap it at the 25.
those are my questions. Thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner Olson?
No, I think we've discussed everything that I brought up. Or had written about.
Same.
Why is that? You call him Jeremy.
Just think Marty McFly.
Marty.
in the future.
My God,
But everything's
Commissioner
McFabulous.
McFadden.
fabulous.
Jeremy,
My
if it
gosh.
helps, it's always written right here.
I
On the
know,
agenda.
I know. It's horrible. I got the worst memory. I apologize for
It's okay, Jason.
You found a way to work that in.
I did.
That was really good. I do not have any questions or concerns. I think the way you wrote that covers all the concerns that were brought up before, outside of Commissioner Walton's concern
So
about
there's,
this open.
there's one other thing on your memo, the
Mhm.
RE line was about the Peterson Farms. You got that?
That was,
The type of,
Kim showed it to me and I
Okay.
said, oh, shoot.
No, I just didn't know if you knew. I
Yeah,
caught that in my review, so,
yeah.
yeah. I
This,
figured it out.
this is what happens when Kim goes on vacation, is I have to proofread my own documents and I don't look at titles for some reason. So, yes.
Okay, I'll look for a motion on number 4, item number 4.
I got it on this one. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and make a motion on the action on the amending the ordinance 2022-08 short-term rental regulations, the city code 10.0 18.xx multiple sections, that we approve.
Recommend approval.
I'm going recommending for approval. Sorry, I thought my recommend at the beginning was going to cover the recommending for approval. Anyways, recommend for approval, the draft ordinance with the following considerations: that the city council have a conversation to determine if that 12-month timeframe or another timeframe for demonstrating ownership is appropriate or not. And then also to correct the typos and misspellings that have been noted in our discussion. And that's my amendment, or my,
I second that motion.
Okay, do I roll call on this one? Yeah, roll call then. Commissioner McFadden?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm just gonna say no, because I don't think the 12-year requirement establishes much of a policy objective.
12 months.
12 months, that's it.
And
Thank you.
I'm an aye as well. So that carries. But I think it should result in some fun discussions at city council. So.
Mayor thanks you for that.
Yeah, McFadden, Commissioner McFadden.
More conversation for city council.
Yeah.
3 minutes, 6.
All right, item number 5, South Weaver Gateway Architectural Review. Trevor, if you don't mind us walking through.
Absolutely. So as the final was going through at the Gateway at City Council meeting, it was noted that while the residential architectural review was included in the information for the December Planning Commission meeting, the commercial was not included. As Kim came back from vacation, I asked her, what did we do there? Because my brain was a mush. The developer didn't submit any commercial because they're anticipating a build to suit option. And so they didn't submit a commercial architectural review. We informed the developer we need to do that as a planning commission. That is within the purview of the planning commission to approve the commercial renderings and the materials used for that. So they provided renderings of the potential architectural facades and materials that will be used in the development for you to review tonight. I'm going to have Kim pull up the PDF document for those. The developer is on for help with the conversation. And yeah,
Trevor,
so
Do you want this to include one slideshow or?
no, just
can you clarify something?
yes.
Did you say that the developer did not submit the commercial at preliminary because it was supposed to be built to suite at that point?
Yes,
Yes.
it's always been both the same.
Okay, because I thought that was when it was going to be the scoop, it was going to be the Steps Brothers Coffee.
That was
They had letters
at-
of intent, was my understanding on that one. So I was just curious
So that was
for clarification.
when they had those letters of intent. That was actually in
The discussion.
the
phases.
long. It was actually back when they were doing the development agreement stage. They were in the conversation development agreement stage. When they went to the preliminary, they actually removed those tenants at that point because they didn't have those.
Oh, no,
anymore.
and just for acknowledgement, because this really did start back in November 12th, Planning Commission of 2020, before myself or Commissioner Davis were even on the Planning Commission. So some of you guys have been doing this, oh, you weren't there either, but have been doing this for quite some time. And it went through Sherry Pippin, and I believe also Barry Burton.
Yes.
So this is a development plan that has been through multiple city
Mhm.
planners
Yep.
and.
With
commissions, so-
multiple iterations
Yeah.
and
So I'm just
lots of-
acknowledging that because I
changes.
recognize how many times this has been. discussed.
Yes, good memory.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so these are the renderings. Now, what the Planning Commission's role tonight is to review these, with it being a commercial construction and the commercial architectural review. You do have the ability to request some amendments, materials. So if you don't like the color of wood, you can request some changes there from the developer. Now, I will say that when each building comes in, if it comes in built to suit, and it is substantially different than this, then we would do another architectural review at that
It
point.
would have to come back.
It would have to come back if it's substantially different.
What constitutes substantial?
I would say if the materials and overall design change. There is not a perfectly defined definition for significantly, and I understand that that has some consternation with it, with me as well, because it's like, well, one person's significant is another. What we would look at as staff is, if you were to put these together, do they look as if they are a cohesive unit, or does this look as if it sticks out? If it looks as if it sticks out from the cohesive unit, then it would constitute a substantial change in our eyes. If that provides some comfort there. I know, I wish that there was, yeah, there's nothing that says 50% of materials change, or it's just as significant.
No
change.
parameters is what you're saying.
Yeah. So this is the first demonstration of that rendering. If Kim wants to go through some of the items, here's demonstrations of some of the floor plan type. Here's some more elevations in black and white of the various buildings that will be housed on it. Here's other renderings of the various buildings that you can see on the side, the type of material. So we have some zinc metal panel. We have Equitone lines fiber cement panel, vintage wood fiber cement panel. So really good sturdy materials that are being proposed. Red metal panels, galvanized mesh metal screen panels, and metal accents. So metal and concrete fiber cement panels will be used, which are high quality, durable, long lasting solutions.
They're gonna hold up to the wind that's gonna buffet these buildings 24/7?
Yeah,
24/7.
yes, I would say that they would hold up better than maybe aluminum siding or even stucco siding that could get damaged by anything that would fly to them.
So I had a quick question. Well, actually, before I get my questions, Sky, would you like to add anything to what staff has done?
Sure, I'm just here, for any questions as well, but, essentially, we found out that we had missed, or I guess not missed, but got back through this process because City Council decided to do a development agreement, to make sure that we did the original proposed phasing, right? So now that that's in a DA, we have to do this architectural review. So it's been a weird back and forth, but we try to, first of all, I really appreciate you guys letting me jump on this agenda so quickly. It means a lot to me, and I'm sorry I'm not there in person. I'm on a vacation with the family, so I'm just doing the best I can. So thanks for letting me be here virtually. And as far as the elevations go, yeah, they're all commercial grade. All of the metal panel systems are something you wouldn't see on a residential application for homes. They're much more costly and just have a way different architectural feel. You can definitely tell that it's in person, that it's commercial. You kind of see them on some of the new dealerships, like the new Lexus dealership that they built in Utah County has some of the very similar type of metal architectural panels that you have on these as an example. And, we do still have some LOIs of tenants hanging on that we've been doing our best to keep them excited and committed as we've been working through this process. And so those tenants that I think we have two, I can't say who they are, until we get a lease signed, but I think we're going to get two that's been waiting, this year and a half with us. And I think they're going to stick with us. So there'll be some submittals with, signage, of course, for a signage permit. They might even want some changes, which would go, through the process with the city. But we did start at a very high level of finish with these buildings.
I had a question. Oh, the look and feel of this is what it's gonna look like regardless of tenant, is that right? Or-
Right.
Okay, okay, got it.
Unless the tenant requires or asks for something, very specific to them, then we would have to go and do it, have another architectural review. But if not, then they would just have their signage permit submitted that would match the architectural style as it is.
Got it. Okay, that's the only question I had. I'll open it up for questions from the commissioners.
Thanks. I have got to say, I love the very robust use of the vintage wood look. I'm a big fan of, just kind of having that old feel. And the fact that is, just for the sake of everybody else, like that's a fiber cement panel. So, it's a very durable product that weathers much better than actual wood, and still gives you that wood look. So, I love the marriage of new technology with the, older, more natural material look. And I think that, there's been some attention there in kind of giving that feel to the city of saying, hey, this is a modern build, it's a modern design, but we're gonna work hard to kind of make this feel like it's not sticking out like a sore thumb, and I really appreciate that.
We did do what we call mountain modern. So that's exactly what we're going for, is we want some of that rustic look, but right next to, modern panels. So we call that mountain modern architecture, which, yeah, we do really like that.
Oh, good.
Sky, I was just wondering, I didn't see on there any stone. Are you putting any rock or stone on these buildings?
No, right now that we don't have any planned stone.
I think if you're going after mountain modern, stone would sure look nice.
Mhm. Sure.
And in case you can't tell, that was Mayor Westbrook. That was-
Oh, okay. Thank you, Mayor.
It wasn't just
Sorry.
random voice from the crowd.
Sounded familiar.
That was Mayor.
Good point. Commissioner Wilson.
I don't know if you want to come to me. Okay, so this, I'm just gonna have to say this because I've written it down and I need it to be said for the public. First of all, how is the public and the citizens supposed to be able to weigh in on something that they have not seen? Aside from everybody probably sitting in this room, we're the only ones that have actually had a chance to look at these architectural renderings. This was not included in the packet. It's not available online. And I find that very, very frustrating because this was a detail that should have been done back in December of 2021 at our preliminary meeting. So that's a little frustrating because I don't feel like we really get a chance to get the community's weigh in on whether or not this fits in with that vision of what South Weaver City is supposed to be. This is our gateway. This is going to be seen. It's going to be right next to Highmark Charter School, which does tend to have a more modern build. We have, the design that we've got at Maverick, which definitely I could say is more mountain modern. You've got the timbers, you've got the stone. I know a lot of design applications or conversations went into what was going to be at Morty's Car Wash. And having seen that building come together, it very much is utilizing the wood, the stone, making it fit within the community. And I still think retaining some of that charm and character that we know is very important to the citizens here in South Weaver. So that's my biggest thing. I kind of feel like it's maybe a little more modern than mountain modern, especially when you start looking into the other buildings and even where we've got Burley Burger and, the Salon Suites and the other buildings that Dan Murray's been approved that we're going on pretty much just on the other side of South Weaver Drive. How do we make sure that this is all cohesive? Because our whole entire east end of town really should, they don't have to be matchy-matchy, but I do think there needs to be maybe some tweaking. And then the only other thing I was curious is, as part of the architectural, is it just a building, or is it also supposed to include a more detailed landscaping plan? Because I'm hoping that the plans that were drawn in on this are not the only ones we're getting.
No.
Landscaping Plan with.
That's with what came over for the whole
Yeah,
development.
yeah,
Okay.
we've looked at the landscaping plan. This is just
Okay.
the rendering.
Just
for
the rendering. And I
Mhm.
do understand that it might change just, once we do get the commercial tenants that commit and want to come in. I don't know. And I don't know how, I like that the glass is in there. I think that's going to take advantage of our amazing mountain views on that end of town. I do have concerns with the one rendering, and I don't have the exact page, but it's the one where it basically shows between building 2 and 3. Yep, right there, where the park benches in between what basically are 2 drive-throughs. Just from a safety standpoint, I don't know how many people are gonna want to be walking across what is a drive-through to get to a park bench. If that's indeed what the plan is. And I
Yeah.
don't know.
So that's more conceptual of just, it's very similar to the landscaping you saw than
Okay,
actual architectural submittal. So in fact, I think if I'm looking at that right, that's actually in the site plan much wider, and that's it's a walkway that connects to the trail system eventually on the other side of the project.
okay. That is a trail.
Can you go back to the site plan view?
So this isn't representative of what this site plan is.
Like the building layout.
Right.
That's what we got.
There is a walkway that goes through there. That originally was going to connect to the trail, but it is not going to.
Had to change a little
The
bit.
development agreement addressed the change of the walking path to be on the east side of the road. So there will be a walking path there, but not trail connectivity on that. The trail connectivity will be on the eastern portion of the property.
Okay.
Yeah, that's true. I guess there's, 2 different ways. That's right.
Anyway, that's my input.
Thank you, Commissioner Wilson.
I think I'll reserve my comment to our closing. I think it's more based upon code than it has to do with anything substantively with the proposed plan.
For me, I'm with Commissioner McFadden. I think the layout looks fantastic, but I tend to lean more towards modern anyway. So, while I appreciate everyone has an opinion on what it's supposed to look like or what good looks like, I'm definitely not an architect in any way. So that I leave that up to my wife mostly, but from my perspective, I think this looks really good, and I think it wouldn't be a blight on the coming into the community or anything. I think it in my opinion, it could be very welcoming, and I think the design is actually pretty sharp. So from my perspective, in my opinion, Sky, I think you did a great job here. I don't have any concerns.
Thank you.
I actually do have another question.
Yes,
and
good.
It would maybe, I know we're not discussing residential. How does this tie in though with what was proposed as residential? And this is actually something more, Trevor, I don't know if you remembered, we'd had that conversation after the preliminary about seeing, and I know we may not be able to do anything about it at this point, but just that back facing of those townhomes that are literally going to be facing South Weaver Drive, and you'll see them, just the aesthetic in terms of getting differentiation between the building units. Because right now it just seems like blank. It's just a building, not necessarily individual homes. And how does it then all tie in together?
Yeah.
So,
This guy, do you want to speak to that a little bit, just for reference?
Yeah. So I know we're not here for the residential architectural review, but I'm happy to answer that. So we know that there was going to be a barrier between commercial and residential, and that ended up being now
isn't it the wall?
the
Masonry wall, yeah.
wall, right? So there's not going to be a lot of cohesiveness between the two visually, especially with that big masonry wall. So we went with, just a more traditional home, but we tried to break up the gables in multiple ways so that, you can see every independent unit. And we'll break them up with colors as well. And so it's going to look, just more like a traditional, just multi-tenant home. So everyone will look different. They're not going to look like one. We're going to try our best so that they look like individual units instead of one mass building, if that makes sense. So there'll be some metal roofing, different gables, designs between one unit to the next, and different colors.
Okay, because I know the front of the building, you've got the hardy board, you've got the planking going in different direction. It looks like it's stone, correct? It's along the front of those, so
Yes.
that kind of helps tie in, and it, kind of answering to what Mayor Westbrook said, if there was a way to maybe tie in that same stone,
Sure.
in some way, it doesn't have to be on every building, maybe one of the commercial buildings or something like that, just to kind of, again, create that more variety, uniqueness.
Right.
So. Okay. That was my final comment, I promise.
Sorry, I was.
You're
getting
having a
some
sidebar.
clarity. Yeah, that was all right. Are there any other additional comments on the architecture review? Now, thanks for pulling that up, actually, because is this what we anticipate the sign to look like? It'll be extremely close to this. Is that the idea?
Yes, so right now there's no signs listed on the site plan. And so each individual sign, when they come to the city, will have to be approved through the sign permit process. But we wanted to include the ideas of what those signs would be, would look like. So this is an idea of what a monument sign would look like if they were to place a monument sign on the site. And then I believe there's another one, or maybe it's the ones in the rear.
Yeah, just the normal ones you would see, in front of Burger House.
So would there just be the one sign that had every tenant or every commercial business
Yeah,
advertised on it?
Are you anticipating a complex sign, a kind of a commercial center?
Yeah, so that's what we would apply for, is a monument sign that would, be for the small shopping center there. So, and depending on how many tenants, maybe not all of them fit, but the major tenants fit. So we tend to go more for aesthetic looking sign, and if you can get 80%, of the businesses there is great. We just don't want it to look like, a big menu of tiny little banners that no one can read from the street anyway. So, we try to steer away from that.
Is a monument sign considered a class 5 sign?
Yes, I believe so.
What's a class?
A class
No,
5
class
sign.
five.
Our sign code.
Because our commercial highway code specifies class 5.
Mhm.
So that's why I just wanted to make sure we're not putting in something that's bigger.
It does, it's smaller
it's
than what
Smaller, okay.
our class 5 signs would allow for 25-foot sign.
Is that like what Maverick has?
Mhm.
Oh, I don't want that. Okay.
No. Our design is like that picture, which I don't see it on my screen, but the picture is like 7 feet, I think, maybe 8 at the most.
Okay.
Window. Oh, it'd be smaller than this one.
Yeah, that's a tough time with scale on.
You
that
don't-
picture.
Yeah.
I was just
That
looking
looks
at
more
the-
than
yeah,
7 or 8
Well,
feet.
look at a
that
car.
looks
Look
Which
at
is
the
far
car.
away. I'm looking at the pedestal for the light.
Visually, visually. Okay.
Nice. All right, any other questions? Everyone good?
I did have a question on the placement of
So-
where this sign is in terms of like, is it by the entrance? Do we know left side, right side?
Right now, it's not on the site plan, so that would be, when we do the
Future.
sign permit, they would.
Come
they would
in,
show
give
where
us the
placement-
location. Okay,
Mhm.
good.
Yeah,
I just want to make sure we're not committing to a location, given all
No.
of the conversation that's taking place over the city sign,
yeah.
by having the same issues.
Mhm.
And really, I'm having a tough time determining that is this review of location of signs and dimensions part of our review process for the site plan or architectural standards?
If, if it is included on the site plan, then you would just we would determine that the location that they've approximated is good. But at the time of when they are going to put a sign in, they have to apply for a permit, and that is an administrative action that's done by the city. So we just,
So it's not even a consideration for the planning commission to contemplate at this point.
no, you just need to be aware of the architectural style of the signs, and yeah.
Because basically everything that's in our chapter 9 sign and lighting regulations will all come into play
Right,
when we actually have something we can.
correct.
Okay. I think on this one, I'll look for a motion to approve the South Weaver Gateway architectural review. If anyone would like to take a stab at it.
I'll make a motion to approve the South Weaver Gateway architectural review.
There's
Is it a review or a plan? Sorry,
It's
we're reviewing the plan,
We're reviewing.
so we're gonna recommend approval of the plan.
yeah,
correct.
Okay, sorry.
So, sorry, I'll make a motion to approve the review of the South Weaver Gateway architectural.
no, it's approved. They're the
Because
approving
it's
body.
basically what we would have done at
Yeah.
preliminary, so it's
Yes.
just an approval.
Mhm. Hello, Kelly.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Commissioner Walton, second. Yeah, all in favor?
Aye.
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 As long as we take into account all the things that we talked about.
I'm taking notes.
Thank you. Am I allowed to put that in there like that?
That's what, it's a little bit
What did we
against,
just find out to?
Bob.
Just the conversation, like there was good points. So, and again, it's gonna come back again. I have a feeling. We're not done with this yet,
Yeah.
All right.
right? We're getting there.
We appreciate your time, Sky.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy your vacation with your family.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
All right, item number 6, discussion on amending R7 multifamily zone. Trevor, take it away.
So we have run our first test of the R7 zone with the Gateway project. As we were going through it, we noticed some deficiencies in regards to zero setbacks or zero lot lines and the setback requirements. What we've noticed is the R7 code reads very much similar to a single family zone and doesn't have a lot of provisions for other uses within it to facilitate that.
Is it uses or dwelling type?
Dwelling types, yeah, sorry. Dwelling type uses. This is just an open-ended conversation that we had a discussion in code committee to talk about those two items. It's an opportunity to discuss any thoughts or feelings you have toward the R7 code as we work through any amendments that may need to take place based on what we've experienced through the development process recently. I want to advance the slide, Kim. In code committee, we discussed that when we look at the setbacks, our current setbacks are based upon the lot configuration and not on building configurations. And so if you have multiple buildings within one lot, we base the location of those buildings based off of the lot building envelope. So if you take the shape of a lot, it's easiest if you do a rectangle, you build off of the side the setbacks for those. Right now, our setbacks are 30 feet by 10 feet by 30 feet. And so a 30-foot front, 10-foot side, 30-foot rear, based off the orientation of that lot to the main road that it's on. We saw with the Gateway project that meant that the lot was oriented toward South Weaver Drive, therefore making the side setbacks being able to be 10 feet from the side, allowing the buildings to about right next to the line of that 10-foot property line. We also found that we don't have any provisions talking about the zero lot lines. So in code committee, we discussed what those setbacks could be, orienting basing off the building location. So where that building location is to the street that building is fronting, and the proximity to other buildings as well. So some ideas to correct that. And again, these are not set in stone. This is just some ideas floating around. Are to assess setbacks at 20 feet front and rear and having a 10-foot setback on the sides, meaning that there would be 20 feet between buildings. And then orienting those for the building themselves as well. And then allowing for zero lot lines. The zero lot lines would basically, those are for the plat, allowing to have those lot lines platted on any location where they are, but basing the setbacks based off the building. So if you have a building with 4 units in it, you would base it off the building itself, but allow that building to be then subdivided into 4 individualized lots for resale. So those are some thoughts there. It's just a general conversation of how you feel about those and any other discussion about setbacks or any other provisions. One other thing in the R7 code that's just a gee whiz, it requires a 100-foot minimum width of a lot. And so that would be, if we allow zero lot lines, we would have to adjust, what we could do on it is create a matrix basically of the use and how you would determine the setbacks based off the use. So if it's a multifamily use, then we would have setback requirements for that versus a twin home use or a single family, because all of those are allowed residential uses in the R7 code. So that's just food for conversation. It does not need to be a long conversation. We're not figuring this out for any meeting coming up in like the imminent future. It's just a way to begin that process now. Basically saying that we are amending our R7 code. So if anybody wants to use it from now on, they have to wait till we have a decision in 6 months to come along.
Can we make that visual? Can you diagram that out?
Sure.
Just in
Sure.
terms, and not right now.
Yeah.
I'm not saying right
Mhm.
now. I'm saying for future, because
Mhm.
this is just the starting point for discussion.
Mhm.
I think that would be very helpful
Yeah.
He's
to be
pretty
able
good at
to.
it. He's already done it a lot.
Yep.
I have done lots of practice.
Look, he was jumping. He was ready
I
to
was like,
go.
yeah, I have
Let's
a
do this.
marker, I
I
have
got
a
this.
paper.
I got some napkins.
That's awesome.
It is really helpful to see those. And as we get further down, I think it's one thing that's really helpful to have a conversation, and Commissioner Walton will probably help us on this as well, is thinking about it in terms of massing and developing a site. So while it's understood that we don't have many R7 zones coming in the future, right, according to our general plan, it doesn't necessarily mean that in the future there will never be those zones. We know there's pressures from entities that we're a subsidiary of wanting us to accommodate for a residential growth. So we want to make sure that we have something in place if and when we are presented. We also could be presented with a really cool development that would utilize an R7 code. And if the council wishes to grant that rezone, we would do that. I'm not saying that's possible or will happen,
What
or
would make it cool?
I don't
What's
know.
the designation there?
You tell me. So that's kind of what the conversation is. If we were to do an R7 zone, because there's a lot of different, like one use for an R7 zone or a multifamily zone is.
You got very excited there.
Sorry, I got so excited. My cough came out. It's actually one of my favorite type of use. So it is one of those. It's called the cottage court type development. What that is smaller single family homes, but they're nestled closer together around a nice little courtyard. Has a little patio area. So it's a starter home, right? It could be a 2 to 3 bedroom home. That's about 1,000 to 1,200 square feet, with no yards except for a shared common open space. So that wouldn't go in any other zone because it is a more dense residential use, but it is a single family use, right? So
Yeah, those are
that-
becoming very
they
popular.
are becoming very popular, and so how would you want those clustered and considering setbacks of those type of things, right? So there's a lot of options out there, and we haven't explored everything with every other entity, and so that's kind of where we're just starting it. Because also coming up in the future, and I was going to update this later, but I can do it now, in regards to multifamily zones and other things, is the state is changed requirements for the moderate income housing plan. And so we're going to have lots of conversations about moderate income housing in the coming months because the state's requiring us to do that. So we'll have lots of these types of conversations on how to potentially
That's
meet those.
SB 64 or whatever.
Mhm.
it is.
Yeah. So there's different massing. So putting different how do you put buildings on the site? How do you orient them? And there's a lot of different ways to do that. And sometimes plain old Euclidean zoning, which is separation by uses, is a very difficult way to regulate that because it's a kind of sometimes a square hole and a round peg type thing.
Is this the state's way of trying to regulate and affordability?
Yes.
Good luck with that.
Yes.
It doesn't work, but
Yes.
Well,
I'm wiping down my
you know-
tongue so hard right now.
I was just in a seminar today about retained homes. If you are aware of what that is, that's kind of the idea that a bank of dirt or a hill basically has got homes built into the bank. So those homes are like retained homes. I think if you think about a retaining wall,
Like the Shire,
yeah,
the Hobbit.
yeah, like a
Exactly like
multi-level
that.
shire or a
That's
single
literally
level
what
shire.
when you're like digging into the
Yeah.
hillside and building a home, I'm like, Frodo?
It's the idea there, yeah, no, it's yeah, Hobbitown, yeah. The idea there is number one, energy efficiency in home building is becoming a much bigger focus these days. It's also something that maximizes open space while still creating density. And creates just a much more environmentally friendly build. I just thought I'd bring that up because there's if that were to be presented, we'd be just like completely caught off guard, off balance on something like that. But the idea of creating density but also maintaining so much more open space, how cool is that, right? I think number two, there's a lot of homes where the front of the house and the back of the house is a very amorphous idea. There are some houses where the front door and the garage are on the same side. There's sometimes when the front door is, facing some little, green space and the garage is facing an alley. I think that, like what is represented on the Gateway project. So, I think paying attention to some of these things where, a front, side, and back of a house is being challenged, really ardently in the architectural design world right now.
I hope we don't have any alleyways in South River. Just saying. No alleyways.
You have more slides. Do you want to go through, do you want to have a conversation about each one?
Nope. This is actually it.
This is our only slide.
I
Isn't
thought
it?
you had more.
There was one. You're waiting for the bad typo. I purposely didn't let Kim show that slide.
You're like,
It
"Oh,
was
skip over that
it was
one."
just the introduction page for the Gateway, and I put Gadatway or something like that.
Gateway.
And so
I just have one question, and this was something I had written when I kind of was just reviewing over the packet, was does the changes that the code committee has kind of discussed, does that fix the issues that we got our city into with having the multifamily rental product instead of the owner occupied housing options
Great question.
that were so strongly favored in the general plan survey both times by our citizens? Does this fix it? Because that was a huge surprise, I think, to everybody
Yeah.
that nobody
Super
really
take care of it right
anticipated.
away.
And it really, to count or to quote, it's just crap.
Mhm.
And it is what it is now, which sucks, but are we gonna be able to fix it with, again, what's been recommended?
So I'll answer it this way. Yes, it allows for uh, more flexibility on their options, right? So part of the code is that we give them a menu of options and they can choose how they want to apply it based on their personal property rights,
Which has
right?
happened.
Which has happened, right? And so one of those options is, all the same unit on, or all the same buildings on one lot,
Mhm.
and then ownership of all of the units. So that would necessitate a rental product. We do provide for a condominium plat, which is different because they measure the airspace and not it's interior airspace and not,
Ownership of the actual lot.
yeah, and
Outside of their home.
you don't own any of the ground, don't even own the walls, you just own the air.
Walls in.
It makes you feel good if you have a condo, right? No, but there's a utility for that, but that's kind of what is that? And then, but what we didn't have is the ability to have a zero lot line and own the ground underneath your home.
Yep.
And
Which is where we
so,
got shot in the
which
foot.
is where we got a little bit shot in
Yeah,
the foot
outside
there.
of a PUD.
Outside of a PUD,
Outside of a
correct. And we don't necessarily, PUD code's nice, but the PUD, it opens the door for negotiation, right? It allows them to negotiate for
And we
more
can't require
density,
it, right? Our
and we
code,
can't require them to
it.
use a PUD. So if they say we want to use the R7, then we do that. So this does allow for that. Now, in terms of requiring the owners to have only rentals or only for sale product,
That was gonna be my next question.
that is a very difficult thing. I've talked to Jamie about that. There's a lot of legal battles being discussed, fought about that. One way is to require in a HOA them to manage the number of rentals within an area, right? So it's not coming from the city, but it's within the covenants of that HOA. To say you'll only allow 70% of the units or 50 or whatever that number is to be a rental unit.
Could we set what that percentage needs to at least be, like, as a minimum, and then, like, give them a range, so we're not dictating, like, hey, you have to have this many, but
I can
really
ask
do
that.
think Based
Mhm.
on our general plan and based on what has been very
Mhm.
clearly expressed, it's owner occupied.
Mhm.
It's not rentals. There was a huge discussion when the loft, was going through their approval process, and the loft is condos, but they're owner occupied. And so I don't want to get us in, the very few remaining areas that we probably have where R7 might come into play, into a situation where we're just all feeling like crap about it.
No, yeah, I can see if that's something we'd say there's a threshold. It has to address it to this minimum of this. I'll talk to Jamie. I'm not sure
Okay.
if there's.
Just like we did with short-term rentals, we're allowing a cap potentially
Mhm.
on the amount of rentals, or short-term rentals in a given area.
Right.
If we set that standard initially within a geographic area that we define, potentially, could we say that you can't
It's
have any rentals?
It's possible, yes. Probably. I'm gonna say anything could be possible if you write it the right way, right? I would just hesitate on guaranteeing that.
It's
But
good to at least have a conversation.
we can have the
starting
conversation.
it, just to
Yeah,
see.
we can see if that would be how we would work that. I do know we toe a very fine line when it comes to personal property rights. So, and I think we all understand that is we want to protect personal property rights as a city and as a country. And so that's where the blurriness comes in, and it's the question of do we want to be a test case, or do we want to play a little safe?
We want to allow for individual ownership, but we can't, there's no way we're gonna be able to force those owners not to rent their property.
Yeah.
It would be really, really hard to enforce.
But it could be.
Yeah.
There could be solutions out there. I'm not saying that there's not, but we would have to work those over with legal counsel. But that's great conversation.
for initial discussion, hopefully it gives you something,
Mhm.
direction and.
Absolutely. Taylor's
So, yeah,
ready.
if there's,
He's like,
if
"I'm
there's
ready."
an opportunity, yeah. So I think the one thing that the proposed code amendments that we talked about doesn't do is it wouldn't, from a, I don't know, architectural standard, or even, I don't even want to say architectural standard, but from an aesthetic, it allows you to continually build something that is more generic in its look and feel. So 4 corners to a building, right? You could just have something very plain Jane. And I think that was something that maybe we'd like to address in the code, but again, we really don't have any parameters to say how we want those buildings massed.
An architectural standardization.
There's that, I think.
Maybe I'm gonna use this loosely because I know we're not urban, but it's kind of like an urban design aesthetic, right?
How we want the building to more than situate on the lot, but how we want it massed on the lot. Meaning, you know, we heard it a little bit tonight in our conversation, how many gables do you want facing front? You know, I mean, all those decisions have an impact on the aesthetic feel of the development.
Right.
So I know we've talked about it in the past. We, as general terms of the city, like there are certain development types that just have been less appealing to some folks within the community. And so, you know, right now, as proposed within this ordinance, we really don't have any control on that general appearance.
Well, based on what you were saying, we're really kind of locked down on what we can put in code, right?
The difference is where, I mean, Commissioner Walton would love us to get to,
So,
is that we have the ability through a form-based type code
yeah,
to address form rather than function,
Oh, okay.
right? So we,
And, construction materials, we can't
Mm-hmm.
dictate construction materials.
right,
no, but I mean, like, for instance, an example that maybe this group can identify with is if you go to Midway, for instance, and, you know, in certain parts of Midway, it's very Swiss looking, very traditional looking. And if you read through their code is very detailed on what is allowed on the exterior look of those buildings and what is not allowed. You know, there's a lot of other cities where, you know, these are extreme examples, obviously, because, you know, if you've ever been to a town that's themed, you know, like Southern California has Solvang. It's a Danish themed, you know, place. You know, in the Seattle area, there's Leavenworth. You know, if you actually look up their codes, I mean, they're like, needs to be, you know, carved wood. It has to have gingerbread that, you know, is so big and whatever, you know. So, you know, those are examples to say, yes, we can specify architectural, you know, specifications to, you know, parts of our code, you know, in certain areas. And, you know, if there's a certain look or a certain, you know, desirable, you know, feel that we want to preserve, you know, we should spend some time thinking about what that's going to look like, you know, like Mayor Westbrook was suggesting, you know, stone, you know, as part of that commercial space. You know, do we want to preserve kind of a look of stone, a certain percentage of stone, you know, on the front of a home? You know, in certain zones, you know, we can specify those things.
yeah, so the state code does provide some limitations on what we can enforce on construction materials. So we could explore what our boundaries are there, but yeah.
And we can always ask, and like I said, we've at
Mhm.
least got some developments and buildings and enough variety that we can point to saying this is something that I think fits in well. You know, because again, overall, we're planning, you know, or trying to help plan, you know, for the overall look of the city.
Mhm.
And we don't want it to just be this neighborhood, and everything looks different and discombobulated. Like
Mhm.
it'd be nice if there was that nice flow. And again,
Yeah.
community.
I think the challenge there for us, though, is that so much of the neighborhood's already built out.
Oh,
that
yeah.
If you
True.
insert something now, then it's like, you have a bunch of stuff and then
That's
it's
Utah.
unified.
That is Utah.
It is.
Commissioner Davis.
So what we've seen,
Revolving.
this is kind of an example of an extreme example, but and I think to speak what Commissioner Walton was talking about, if you have in your code that buildings can only be 50 feet. 35 feet is ours, right? You can only be 35 feet tall. And let's say we have a bunch of commercial that wants to front somewhere. Well, they're going to maximize as much as they can. So they're going to build it at the 35 feet. So you have everything at 35 feet. And so allowing for some variability there would create more visual appeal, right? So instead of capping it, and I know this is not necessarily setback technically, right? Setbacks have a place to play with it, but so if you allow, say, you're allowed three floors, and those floors can be whatever height you want within building code, right? Then there's some variability there, right? So that's just an example of height. But when we're looking at setbacks, so if you have, these are the setbacks, well, they're going to maximize they're going to put every 20 feet is going to be a building that's going to look very similar, because they want to make sure that engineering can just do it and maximize their thing.
Yep.
And and it's something we'll explore is how do we create that variability to have the appeal? Because what's appealing is where we see, oh, that house looks different from that house, but they're all within the same genre,
Yeah.
right?
What was the reasoning for just the 10-foot in between buildings, but we have 30 by 30? Doesn't that seem like
That's the other thing
maybe
I
a
was gonna-
little more open space? Like, we're not trying to, I'm sorry, I don't want to look like Clearfield. I don't want to look like West Haven and some of these places that you're seeing these developments go into that are just right next to each other. We like our open space.
Mhm.
So I think that's something else at a code committee is when you look at those setbacks and lot lines, what's the purpose of implementing those? Right? So as we review it, I think it'd be beneficial to ask the question,
That's
why
why
are we
10.
saying 20 feet on the back lot line? Why are we saying 10 between buildings? I think
Should it
that's
be
a
more?
really valuable conversation. Well, and then also the units that you can allow within that buildable lot. Because there are trade-offs. If you allow more buildable units within a building envelope, then you will also open up for more open space.
Yeah, like if you have like a single family attached, do they get with that 0 lot line? What's the setback then going to be around those?
That's what you were saying about
Mhm.
having like a table, almost, right?
Yeah, kind of having a table would help on like, okay, this building, this dwelling type, and if you have a building, this is how you could justify that. So you could have a little bit more, I was just gonna say fun, massing your buildings, right?
Sure.
So that it
Yeah.
is visually appealing.
Well, I know with the form-based coding is you can actually go in and you can put those elements, correct?
Mhm.
So I remember you brought that up before and like.
Yeah.
I would say a form-based code is perfect. Part of the form-based code, if you do a form-based code, it has to be based on centers, right? You establish small areas that each have kind of their own, for lack of a better term, general plan for that small area, right? It's called a small area plan, but it guides the development of an area and what's going to look like. And then the form-based code is written to that area, typically using alternate zoning that was then applied for that area. So that's a long conversation for a lot of different things, not necessarily R7, but yeah, it does provide, the opportunity to say, in these zones, we don't want garden style apartments. We want mansion style apartments that look like a large single family home, but have 4 units within it. So it matches the visual aesthetic of the city, but allows for some varied use there, right? So yeah, so there's that option that allows you to we don't necessarily care if it's a single family or a fourplex, as long as it looks cohesive with the community, build it, right? There's some trade-offs and some scariness to that. So again, anybody listening online, we're not changing that or doing that. This is just all conversation.
The only thing that stuck out to me was the setback, the front setback. Let's have a conversation. Because whenever I think about a small setback, I think about, well, that's going to restrict how many cars you can put on the driveway. And inevitably, anytime I go through a townhouse community, it's like scary because there's so many cars, right?
And trucks.
And so,
Don't
like
get
my
me
mom has a condo, or she lives in a condo in Harriman. If you've ever been to Harriman, that's like ridiculous. But they fit those buildings, they're so tight, like there's no parking anywhere. She doesn't have a driveway, it's just straight into her single car garage and then it's street right there. So that would be the only thing that I would send out, is that I think there needs to be a really healthy conversation about, okay, do we need to force it because we want space for driveway? So that there's lots of area to park cars so they're not on the street all the time. That'd be cool.
As you increase your setbacks, you also have to start thinking about how you landscape those areas
Right.
and what that means for water usage and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah, absolutely. I think that's, when we sat down as a code committee, I think, we had one member that kind of led forward the conversation about what they thought was appropriate for setbacks. And I think it quickly, you realize, well, why?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, and then it becomes a conversation about, well, did you mean 10 feet from this side or 10 feet from that side? And what does that create?
I think asking the why question, having a discussion on why is super important, right? Because if you have a definitive why, then it's really easy to make calls from there. I think. So,
Agreed.
yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. Any other thoughts on?
Move forward, fix it. Here we go.
So I just have one request as we start this conversation, if we can have a substantive look at what could be built under the current code or even the proposed code versus what could be accomplished with a form-based code, I think that would be really illustrative and help.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay.
I will not be next month. I will just, it's gonna be we're in for the long haul on this one, but
Yep.
yeah.
It will be.
This isn't something that's needing to get done.
No.
And because we've started the discussion, it sets that 6-month
Mhm.
clock. So nothing that comes
I mean, there
in.
was with the Gateway project, there is a development agreement that says that the city intends to update the R7 code to allow for, but it doesn't require the city to do it at any sort of time or manner of how it's going to be, just that we would begin considering that.
I think there
So,
are certain elements though that we probably want to tie up sooner than later, and that
Yeah,
would be
that's
the plotting, or the sorry, the platting of the zero. lot
Mhm.
The
line.
zero lot line.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and we can take it and,
You can prioritize that.
mhm.
Yep.
Any other points?
Not on this.
Everyone good? All right, moving on. Item number 7, comments. Commissioner McFadden, would you like to go first?
No comments.
No comments. All right, Commissioner
No.
Wilson.
None.
Yeah, I got a couple. I think the first one that I want to bring up is this architectural review. Okay. The part of this is going to be the architectural review portion of our code, just reviewing it. I feel like there is, I don't know, the whole purpose statement within that portion of our code directs that there's going to be a comprehensive plan relating to the visual quality of the city, and we don't have one, right? And so I do feel like maybe that's something that we bring to the attention of either the city council or the code committee update, to say that we have no standard or plan to relate this back to in our decisions for that review. I would also like to have that comprehensive plan potentially look at adding residential compatibility within that review. I know it doesn't read that way right now, but I definitely feel like as we look forward to how our setbacks impact the shape of buildings, especially with multifamily, I think it would be an important component of our review. And then just generally speaking, I was curious, it says that the Secretary of the Planning Commission shall notify approval or denial of that plan. I assume that's Kim.
Yes, I
I've just never
think
heard.
that may be a leftover piece of code, but I think, yes,
We don't have a
we
secretary.
don't have an appointed secretary, so I'd have to see where that's I know where you're talking about.
Yep.
I just have to see if we have any definition of who that is in code, and if not, then that's probably something we need to fix. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
it seemed like that whole section about architectural review just could use some tweaking.
Mhm.
And I don't know, as far as priorities go, we're getting deep on that code committee.
Yes.
So I just.
Didn't you start out that way?
It
started
gets
out
deep.
with staff.
You guys
It
are
gets
already
deep.
like.
It's like quicksand. If you
Yeah.
struggle too much, you just get farther, and we've struggled, well, not struggled. We've made a lot of movement.
Yep.
And
By the way,
we're
the efforts are
fine.
appreciated because. Code review,
Yeah, it seems like,
sorry.
and priorities get reshuffled, right? And I
Mhm.
totally understand that, but it's just, trying to close on some of these issues, I feel like is important, and just having a look at, we always talk about reprioritization of some of those efforts, but it seemed like that kind of got stalled out in our last code committee update. I think that was everything that I wanted to hit. So, yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, I had a couple options. One thing that I was talking to Trevor and the mayor about earlier this week was starting conversations around how can we be more proactive on the planning commission instead of always reactive. I think a lot of the stuff that Trevor brings to the table is trying to accomplish that, but I feel like there's the city council does their thing, and then we kind of do our thing, and every once in a while there's things that overlap and we feed each other information. But I think there might be an opportunity to have like, what's the city council's plan for the year, and then how can we feed into that plan so that we can feed them the appropriate changes or ideas or updates or whatever, so that we help them accomplish their plan while also cleaning things up and doing whatever else is there. So I wanted to kind of throw that out there as an idea for you guys.
Do we know if they have an annual plan?
We do have an annual strategic plan. I think what I've seen in other jurisdictions is they do either annual or periodic co-meetings. So having a planning commission and city council meeting together to discuss, these are the priority items in the strategic plan. And this is as the advisory body for the city council. These are the items that we want you to kind of look at through the year. That's a potential to do that. We haven't, as far as I'm concerned, we haven't done that here in the recent years, but it's a way to just look at, because the planning commission is an advisory body and an administrative body for the city, and so as such, administratively, you get items that come to you to approve for development, and then the advisory capacity is based upon directive from the council. So the council's like, advise us on these areas in the code, right? And so then rather than you saying, well, we would really like to just amend our 7 by ourselves, it's like, well, that should be the council saying, we advise you to do this, we want your advice on this, right? And so that's kind of the thought process there, is how do we align those a little bit to accomplish the mission of the planning commission.
I love it, because right now it feels like we're taping a message to a soccer ball and kicking it over the Berlin Wall at each other. When there was a Berlin Wall. But, like pulling that down and having a co-meeting, quarterly or something like that, I think would be very beneficial, to kind of align each other's,
Shock.
goals there.
I don't think Commissioner Boatwright would appreciate other meetings, additional meetings. I don't want to speak for him, but.
So I know, like, we've had planning summits in the past that happen at the beginning of the year. And I would say that I don't recall any real direction being given to the planning commission to consider, advising the council on really any substantive item. Right, there was no agenda to take certain objectives, efforts on and discuss them during our meetings. So if we were to do a summit or something like that again, I would say just establish clear goals for the planning commission to take on and then schedule them throughout the year. You know, we could have another meeting to maybe place a priority on some of those items.
I don't know if it requires necessarily an extra meeting per se. Maybe it does. Maybe that's the best way to do it. But maybe something, I guess in my mind, I just feel like we're very reactive. And to your point, it's like, okay, it's our turn. Okay, now it's your turn. Oh, it's back to us. Okay, now it's your turn. And maybe that's just how it's supposed to set up, but it feels like there's an
A
opportunity.
chunk of it is probably that, but there's the advisory portion, and it's just like,
Maybe we just need to sit and review. We did just do the general plan update, which was
Yeah.
massive. Maybe it would be, go back and review it. Make sure we're fully understanding what was created in that general plan update, because
You
when we
said
think
just
about it-
recently, that was 2 years ago.
oh, I know, but and nobody wants to redo it again.
Clock is ticking.
But, the general plan and our code are the only guiding parameters that we have as a commission to advise city council. We're not creating laws. We're not able to, personal preference. Those are our guiding documents. So I hope
And-
we all really understand them.
and not to stir up any PTSD,
No.
but typically a good review of the general plan is every 5 years I don't want to say dust it off, but we pull it out again and we review it and make sure that it is what we want still, right? And it's still functioning. So doing a periodic review prior to that 5 years will give us a list of, well, maybe we need a little bit more clarity on this, or maybe we do need design standards because we don't have any design standards to match it against. when we
Commissioner
do.
Wilson had a great point at our last meeting with regards to our sensitive lands overlay. What does that mean? What does that mean in terms of if you have an area that's in sensitive lands, that we as a commission can say, these are things that suffice
Mhm.
in terms of development plans, or this is maybe something we need to require, and it needs to go that next step and that next level. Right now, it's our discretion. Well, that's gonna vary across every single one of us in terms of our discretion, so.
Yeah. So, and we can take some of those initiatives on our own as a commission, right? Just to review some of those items, so long as it's not a legislative action.
Yes, we can do, just like we had with tonight with the R7, we can do
Review it and then send it to-
discussions and trainings and updates.
But to the
Mhm.
point, like, we want to be in sync with what the city council would like to be advised on. So I don't know how that communication realistically can happen. Is it just separate meetings and we're passing that through?
Well, I think it could be as simple as the city council sets the goal for the year. They say, okay, here's our goal, and then we can discuss, okay, how can we fit into this goal? What actions can we take
Yeah.
So I
to
don't,
play into that?
and I think that's an important distinction. I'm not sure if we want to just see what the direction could be.
Mhm.
I think we would like to take direction from the council, and these are our objectives.
Well, and I think it's worthy to say that there are 2 buckets of advice that they're gonna be feeding from. One is some planned ideas that they generally want stuff, advice on. So the bucket of emergent issues that come up.
Mhm.
So there is a bucket of, that reactiveness that just will always be there.
Yeah.
But I think instead of that bucket being this big, we're making that bucket as small as possible and supplementing it with a planned bucket.
Mhm.
Can I get your opinion on this, Mayor? If you have one in the moment?
I think everything, I'm positive on everything you guys have been discussing. I think it all sounds something that needs to be done. And be beneficial, for sure.
So just, I think something that maybe if you want to bring up with city council,
I've got taken some notes.
Cool.
Yeah.
and then we'll just keep it on the back burner until we can hear back from you and then we can kind of see where that goes. Cool.
Or even if there's objectives that we have with the remaining time that we have in the year. try to
Well,
get those now.
Yeah, that's the other thing I was gonna say, that even if they are not comfortable agreeing to a certain goal, right, or goals, I think we could still, to Commissioner Losey's point, at a minimum, we could say, okay, what what do we not fully understand, one of us or all of us, right? Let's talk about that on one of our planning commissions so that we can get a really good understanding, and then maybe that leads to something.
I agree with what Jeremy said about the sensitive land. It would be great to
Yeah,
have a little better knowledge on just exactly what that is, what you can do in there. You know,
Can we actually put that on the agenda for next one and let's just start it and let's just start the discussions?
Do we have an agenda for next meeting already?
Not yet, but we now do.
Can I request on the agendas? Luckily, this one was a pretty small packet. Can we please work at getting them a little sooner rather than, I feel like they're getting closer and closer and closer to meeting time is when the packets finally get sent out. And we all have full-time jobs, you know, outside of, huh?
I-
1 week prior.
Yeah, and I did get it out Friday
That's the
morning.
standard, but that's not how it's been, at least
Yes, I
the last couple
understand, but
meetings. And I understand there's things that happen. I'm just
This-
asking and putting in a request, because I know if we'd gotten the packet that city council had of 300+ pages, you know, 48 hours beforehand,
369.
I
Yeah,
wouldn't have shown up.
mhm. Yeah,
Right.
that one was we've tried to really get it out. This last one, we did get it out on Friday. And so, but the one prior was really close, and there was some extreme circumstances, but that's all me,
I'm
and I'll
not
own it.
judging you.
So, but yeah.
Not trying to make you feel guilty.
So, no, it's fine. I make myself feel guilty all the time. So, no, yeah, it's been crazy, and I'm managing workflow and I'm getting better at it each day, but, yeah, so duly noted though.
did you have another comment on that? Before I-
Not on that particular, just more what we're gonna do with our next agenda.
Okay, I'm curious now.
No, I'd rather have a bias towards action, towards getting something on the agenda that's substantive and not just another discussion on what we want to talk about.
Okay, so, well, from what I took from the sensitive lands is that, one, we don't fully understand exactly what that is. So what I would like to see is something that outlines, okay, this is what sensitive lands is, this is where, maybe this is where it is. These are the restrictions that come along with that.
Here's the reports, they're useful.
Yeah,
Here's
so,
how to maybe
so
read a
we walk
report. that's
away with
useful.
knowing, okay, when anything happens in that area that's considered sensitive land, we have this bulleted point of, this is how we handle it, or this is our lookout, or something
We
like that.
need valuable data to work with.
I would say by the time we publish the next agenda, we have discussion items, and sensitive land sounds like it's one of them. Do we feel like one is enough? Or I'm just trying to get a general sense.
Well, am I also correct in saying that you're gonna provide some of those images for potential form-based code? What buildings could look like? I mean, was that a commitment made?
Yes, I
And it's
don't know if
specific
we
for
can
R7,
get it in
right?
June.
Okay.
I'm not sure if we can get it done by the
Okay.
first meeting in June, but we can see how
some
things
point here.
go. Yeah, yeah,
Got it.
yeah, that is,
Jared's being very.
I'm trying-
non-committal,
I'm trying to determine my workload over the next.
Okay.
We got an audit by OSHA, and so I have to comply within the next 30 days, so.
And that June meeting is on the 9th.
Just
correct?
thinking of those
Yeah.
things.
Okay.
Yes, June 9th. One,
And I wasn't
yeah,
expecting it, I was just asking.
yeah, it will be coming forward.
Can we just shoot for July, and then
Mhm.
if you know that you're not gonna be able to make that deadline, then we just have a discussion in June?
Yeah, that's fine.
So I think it'd be great to kind of get an idea of what our agenda items are gonna be for those kind of planning commission level discussions.
Mhm.
So it sounds like we're gonna try to have something ready to discuss sensitive lands by June. At least to have a discussion. I don't think I don't know how much prep goes into that.
Well, I think my idea is, let's give city council some time to think it through and see if they have, and then we have at least a month or two of items that we can at least discuss. And then by that time, I'm hoping that we would be able to come to some kind of consensus around, okay, this is the plan going forward for the rest of the year.
So I think I always struggle with the fact that we technically, when we plan our meetings, we only have 12 in a year. And when you put it in that context, like every meeting is critical.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
I get that if we want to seek direction from the city council and what our priorities for these kind of conversations need to be, great.
Well, I know I'm not ready to talk about it yet because this is just an idea that I wanted to bring to you guys. So I think by June at a minimum, if you guys want to bring items that you absolutely want to put on the agenda, that we can have, maybe not the next month, but maybe we can draw it out so we don't have 6-hour-long meetings. I think everyone appreciate that. Then I think that could be something that where we could build something, and then that gives, again, city council time to put their input into the whole scenario, and then we can hopefully merge those two agendas together at a minimum.
And we're not going to two planning commission. I thought I heard discussion about that during the marathon meeting on Tuesday. We're not
No,
You guys are.
increasing. The
You
city
guys
council
are,
is
city council
increasing.
is gonna discuss it.
Okay, discussing increasing. So we might end up just naturally, automatically getting more direction and, you know,
More often,
input
yeah.
from more
That's true.
often, so that for our meetings, we're gonna have more agenda items and.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, the amount of stuff that we're getting through code committee, it just feels like we need more tempo, just in that form.
More speed.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, kick it
So
up.
I could, well, you know,
Your code committee? Who is code committee? I know we talk about it in general. Who is actually on the code committee?
there
I
are
know,
three members of the city council with the mayor included, Haley and Joel. And then Gary and Taylor are
Okay.
represented from the planning commission, and then myself, Jamie and Dave
and
represent.
how
us.
often do you meet as
We
code
meet
committee?
every night of city council, so that right before city council meeting.
So will, if they increase the number of
Monthly, is
meetings?
that month? That's not every.
It's twice a month.
Is it
twice a
twice?
month?
Are we doing it
Go
twice a
three
month?
times a month?
So what we have been doing, Mayor
So we-
Mountain,
No
change
wonder why
it.
I'm so busy.
He's like, hold on.
This is why I'm so tired.
Yeah.
I think initially we just started every week. And even with that
Yeah.
tempo, it feels like you could quickly get bogged down, like there's
With
just,
everything.
so I mean, clear direction on what we need to accomplish helps, right? And maybe.
Well, it helps the
having-
priorities in the code committee, right?
Yep.
So then you can cut through it. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say the same thing. I mean, even the recommendations from the code committee to put something to the planning commission for consideration. I mean, that helps with the lift within the code committee. So I could potentially see that, you know, if we increase the tempo of what's coming out of code committee for recommendation or discussion from planning
Review what's
commission.
needed.
Yeah, you might need some additional meetings depending upon what's coming through for approval or development proposal.
I think, let's cross that bridge when we get there, I think. And then, if we agree that, hey, maybe it's worth doubling up on meetings for a couple of months to get through a ton of stuff, then if we all agree on that, then we're good.
And then we fixed everything.
Yeah. All right, any other thoughts before I move on to my final comment? My final comment is like completely unrelated to anything else we discussed, but just a thought I had while we were discussing other things tonight, and I didn't know how this plays into overall city planning, so I just wanted to get a lot of feedback from you, and that is, do we set any kind of restriction on the number of people that live in our community based on the resources that can actually feed that amount of
Are you
people?
talking about like the water resources? Or?
Yeah, so let's just use water as an
Mhm.
example. So we have a definitive amount of water too that we can use, right?
So the city, yes, so the city has a water contract with Weber Basin that has a set amount of water. Every development that is coming in is required to go to Weber Basin and buy more water for us. So if Weber Basin is unable to provide them with more water, then they will be unable to process an application with us.
Okay.
Does that make
Gotcha.
sense?
So there is a.
So, yeah, so we do that with most resources, all of them. So every utility has to sign off on a development saying, yes, we have the capacity and will serve that area. And so we require that in the sketch plan phase, yeah.
Okay.
Really, it's very beginning, we know whether we have.
Yeah.
So, okay, so my next question, and then you may not know, nobody may know the answer to this, I'm just really curious now, is there anything that prevents Weber Basin from overextending itself and saying, yeah, we can do it, and then, oh, sorry, can't do that?
No.
No.
The state has guidelines.
Yeah, the state, they have their their capacity, right? Meters, and they look at that. State regulates them quite heavily. But as far as like drought restrictions that we've seen this year, when we talked to Weber Basin and about drought restrictions, we said, hey, what are we going to be at? Are we going to restrict anything? And they said, you actually are one of the most drought tolerant cities that we service. Well, we are small, but that doesn't necessarily mean we could have been the worst. But no, what they mean by that is that the way that we have our water structured and the agreements we have in place with them is we have access to water. So it's water shares, right? So it can fluctuate. They can fluctuate down and say, well, a share, we can only give you this amount this year based on your shares. But they said we are more than ready to handle it, and we're not going to have any complications with water shutoffs.
You can say, Brandon.
So as far as our culinary water goes, because secondary is all districts, it has nothing to do with it.
No.
Secondary water.
But, you
So
know,
our culinary water with Weber Basin, we've got ample water for our needs. Here some years ago, we bought a lot more than what we needed, but we felt like we needed to do that, and we did. So we've got a pretty good surplus of culinary water that we can obtain.
That doesn't mean people should start watering their lawns
No,
with
they
their culinary
can.
water, because it
They
all comes
can.
from the same place.
But Weaver Basin
Just
made the
saying.
comment that South Weaver is in, as far as that water supply goes, what we own or what they contract to us, South Weaver's in better shape than any of the other cities around. We've got a surplus of water.
And it will never go down.
But-
because we require each new development.
Yeah, see, we'll always have that supply
Yeah.
because we now require all the developers
To add
bring
to it.
their water with them, or you don't develop.
Is that calculated based on their land mass?
Correct.
That their acreage, I guess?
Mhm.
So we're in pretty good shape unless something happens to Weaver Basin.
Hey, that's one utility that's
Like you were saying,
positive.
can they oversell? I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
Hopefully not.
I don't know if there's conversations within the state legislature to provide water rights to the Great Salt Lake, much like they do for Utah Lake. And I'm just wondering, I mean, this is maybe a little outside of our scope, but like if you start taking out water right to help the Great Salt Lake out, you know, where do they target?
They're going to
taking-
buying that from people that own it.
For
So
sure.
the
The
state
shares,
is
right.
going to like the farmers and people like
Hmm.
that that's got
I just
a lot of
something,
shares or a lot of water and purchasing that from them so they can just run it straight to the lake.
it'd probably be something to really watch closely. I think, you know, if we're watching our water, or we have a surplus of water, do they look at a city like South Weaver to say, hey, we'd like to buy more shares back or something of that nature?
$1 million. No, wait, what do we need for the storm drain facilities improvements?
us-
Okay.
Give us several million. We'll not sell ourselves
Tens of
short, no.
millions.
Okay, that's all I had. That was just something I have been thinking about, and I know I brought up the whole water thing several times last couple meetings, but it's definitely something that's high on my.
It is on everyone's
On
mind,
everybody's.
so.
Okay.
The other utility that's not really take into consideration is bandwidth for.
Mhm.
Right.
Certainly feel like
I
there
know,
are.
right?
Connex, baby, when are we getting
I
it?
know.
It's coming.
Yeah, I'm excited for that one. Sorry, go ahead, George.
I just have one item just to let you know. Tentatively, and this isn't for sure, but I wanted you to make it, mark it on your calendars. Tentatively on the 24th of June. Yes, the 20. No, that's not right. The 20. The second city council meeting in June is the 20 something. We are planning a discussion on the moderate income housing legislation that just passed.
City council meets what, first?
For second and fourth
Oh,
Tuesday.
second, fourth,
So
so 14th
28th.
and 28th.
28th, yes.
Okay.
That's a tentative. We're tentatively putting on there. that legislation doesn't require us to have anything in place until October, but I would rather get us going on it now than waiting until September and going, oh no, my hair's gone now because I have 0 left to pull out. So what that means is we are going to invite the planning commission to come to that meeting to have the initial conversations about that
On the 28th?
on the 28th. If you can make it. If the majority of you can't make it, then we will talk to the city council about when we want to do that.
I'm out.
Out and out.
I won't
Okay.
be able to be there either, unfortunately, on that.
Okay, well,
I can,
There are very few things on my extended calendar that
Yeah.
I know exactly where I'm gonna be, and I will not be here.
well, it sounds like a fun time, hopefully.
Yeah.
Look good. Yeah, so that was just a thought. If we need to move it, we can. It was a tentative, but we just wanted to gauge the feeling there. The reasoning.
That's the moderate.
Moderate
housing
income housing
discussion.
discussion. The reason being is that the state has put us on the list of a city that is required to update our moderate income housing plan. What that means is that we have to look at the menu of items. They've added items, but they've added some caveats, is that we can't select items that are similar to each other. So these aren't necessarily items, but it's like we can't say create a plan, initiate a plan, and fulfill a plan as our 3 menu items, right? Those are all similar.
How did we
And
get
so-
added on a
I was
list?
gonna say, is that what places on the list?
I'm not sure.
How do we get off the list?
I'm not sure, but
Right?
we're one of
Can we
84
tell them about our
cities.
Water deficiency?
We're one of 84
Can't
cities
do
that was
all.
selected to do this. So
We wanted
Um,
how many?
84.
Out of, wait, 1 out of 84?
Yeah, we're 1 out of 84 that was selected. So South Ogden gets to do it too. So, and a few others. But yeah, so we do have to update that, and it's going to have it's going to just trigger a long conversation, and I understand that. So, but we don't want one long conversation in the September planning city council. We'd rather some 30-minute, 40-minute discussions, take it bite-sized pieces throughout the summer, so we
Was it city statewide or just within like Davis County?
city statewide. Mhm. So, but yeah, so it sounds like it's going to be a conflict for some of you. I haven't talked to Gary about it. It may be a conflict for him. So, but it is something that we do need to start on. And we thought a conversation between the council, planning commission, and staff on the steps to move forward through that process were helpful, because it has to be adopted in October of this year. So
October of this year is when that,
we have to have our updates set and adopted.
253.
Nope.
all right,
Thank you.
look for a motion to adjourn.
I will make a motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
I
Aye.
Aye.
Second.